So nice to have Lori here with our vocalist that wasn't able to be here this morning who was singing that, and at the last minute Lori said, I'll do it. So, and you did a great job of that. Thank you. And then Hillary Hummel back with us on harp. It's nice to have you back, Hillary. And Miles Belvin on trumpet. I haven't met Miles before, but good to have you with us, Miles. So I have my phone over here, and I deliberately turned my phone off, and I put it aside because I'm expecting a granddaughter at any possible moment. We expected her last week early, and then I see her mom and my son, they're back there. So, oh my gosh. So we're hoping for no sudden emergency. Actually, we're hoping for whatever happens. And if it happens right here, Sharm will jump up and I will run out. So grabbing my wife from the sanctuary as we head on. So it's so good to have you all here this morning as we think about this. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, this idea of resurrection. And in particular, I want you to think about the daring aspect of it. When I was a kid in third grade, I don't know how many of you have, raise your hand if you've ever been dared to do something. I was going to have you do this during passing the peace, and I thought, I don't know what's going to get passed back and forth. There might be some information we just don't want to know or shouldn't pass along. But so all of us have done this at one point or other, or maybe we've played that game, Truth or Dare. And daring was kind of a reality in my life because my mom and dad were divorced. My mom worked late hours, and so there were lots of evenings where I was left to my own creativity with my buddies. But in third grade, I was a little more under control, under authoritarian sort of structure. My grandmother was an opera singer, and she was part of the Opera Association, was one of the two ladies who formed the Opera Association back in the late 40s and early 50s. And then as kids growing up in the early 60s, we had to go to operas. And so when I would get together with maybe 6 to 8 of my Cub Scout buddies, we would go to the opera. I mean, that's not a thing that we did of choice, but it was kind of something we did because I had to. And they were willing to go with me. And, of course, they were sung in strange languages, and I hadn't seen this one before, but all of them looked alike to me. They were dramatic. Somebody was going to die. Somebody else was going to, come out with a sword. There'd be sort of a tragedy, and then there'd be a big finish at the end, right? And so we're sitting there in a full convention center watching La Traviata, and we're at that scene where Violetta, I don't know if you've watched this, if you know this opera, but just think Romeo and Juliet with a different setting. But there she is. She's stretched out on the chaise lounge, and she's dying, and unfortunately her boyfriend, the man who loved her, has left the country because he's been told that she was a woman of ill repute and that she didn't love him when in fact she really did, but she had to cover for his own sense of shame and honor, and the story. So when he finally discovers the truth, he's rushing back, and of course she's dying on the chaise lounge. Well, we only know this because we read the little summary in the bulletin, and that was 2 hours ago at the very beginning of the opera. And so here we are towards the end of the opera, and my buddies and I, we're all getting pretty frustrated, right? And it's pretty quiet and pretty intense. And that's when my friend Mike Chambers turns to me and he says, hey, Tommy. He says, Tommy. Remember, we're in third grade. He says, do you see those campfire girls? And they're like 2 rows ahead of us, right? And so I say, yeah. He says, do you see the redhead? And I said, yeah. And he said, I dare you to write her a note. And I'm like, no. My grandmother has assigned these ushers to keep an eye on us. And they're just not too far back there. And he says, come on, I dare you. Well, so he gets a piece of paper, and a pen, and I write a note, and we just say, give us your name and phone number. So we fold it up, right, like a football, like this football when you played the game on the table, and then we scooch it down because we're towards the end of the row, and we scooch it down and got lucky, and one of the girls picked it up. Well, it said to the redhead, right? It said to the redhead. And so they pick it up, and you can see them kind of giggling, and you can see the usher's eyes starting to turn our direction, and they pass it down, and she reads it, and then she writes something, and it comes back, and they send us a note back. And it kind of scoots up the side of the aisle. They just kind of toss it back the side of the aisle, and my friend Mike, he grabs it, and he opens it up, and it says, "Stop writing us notes." And so we fold up another note and write it again. And we said, "The girl next to the redhead." And we scooted underneath, right? And so now I don't know what's happening on the stage. We're just watching. We're talking to each other and watching. And as things start to build, and it looks like just the right moment, there's a lot of commotion and there's a lot of sort of noise going on. They toss back another note, and there's a name, Vicky, and there's a phone number. And the four of us third graders look at each other like we struck gold. But like, what do you do with the phone number, right? So call. Thank you. That's exactly right. So Mike decides, how about we do this? And my brother Michael, who's with us, was the one that came up with this idea. He's always been the dramatist in the group. He says, we'll pretend to be a rock group. We'll act as if we're a rock group from Britain, and we've come over kind of like the Beatles, and we're surveying people by phone to see if they like our music. And we can do this because I had a plastic electric guitar that had one of those suction cup sort of things that you plug into it, and then the amplifier, vibrates with the sound. And then Mike Chambers had a snare drum, and my brother Michael would shake the maracas. And then we all practiced our best fake British accent. But we didn't know how to write lyrics, so we just sang Vicky's name. We called the number. A girl answered it. She said she was Vicky, and we went through the whole thing. "Hello, we're from England, and we want to try our best new music on you." And it was terrible. And we didn't have a song, just Vicky, oh Vicky, we really like you, Vicky. And it just was like that. But she giggled and laughed, and we heard the girls in the background giggling and laughing. And then my friend Mike Chambers said, "Is the redhead there?" And she's like, "I'm not talking to those guys." She wouldn't have anything to do with it. So it went on like this for a couple of weeks. We kept calling, and it was fun, and that's as far as it went. Like, what do we do after that, So we just had fun for a while, and then we drifted off and did other things. Now, unbeknownst to me, for the longest period of time, my brother continued to call Vicky. And they became phone pals. He literally would call her by the week, and then it drifted off into monthly, and then after a while it was sort of checking in every several months, and then every year, and we went on and did other things. Well, it was the year of my engagement to Linda. She was going to college at UTA, and I was, actually she was going to, it was the year before that, so we hadn't gotten engaged yet. But we'd been dating, Linda and I had been dating for about 4 or 5 years, and we were sitting in the living room of our house. And Linda and I are just kind of going over some stuff and talking when all of a sudden Michael comes running in. Now he's 17, right? And I'm 18 and Linda's 19, and he comes running in and he says, "Tommy," he says, "guess who's on the phone?" I said, "Who?" Because this is the first time I'd heard about Vicky again. He said, "It's Vicky." I said, "Vicky who?" He said, "You remember Vicky from the opera." And I said, "What opera?" And he said, "That opera we went to, La Traviata, we got the number." The girl said, "No, we got the other girl's number. Vicky, it's Vicky." And I'm looking at him stunned, like, what? And then he hands the phone to Linda. And Linda picks the phone up, and her voice on the other side says, "Linda Fox?" And then Linda says, "Vicky?" They're roommates at UTA. I mean, they're actually roommates. And Linda looks at me when she says, "I'm the girl that said don't talk to him." And we discover years later, somehow, everything fell together into, who knows, coincidences and stuff. But it was just the most ridiculous thing, acting as if they were friends and then discovering that we'd been connected all this time. Just off of a dare, right? Now, not all dares do that. Not all dares end up in some kind of strange, coincidental, serendipitous, amazing kind of moment, or do they? Do they? I kind of would like to suggest maybe they do. If you look at the word dare, We think of dare as sort of like a temptation, as sort of like a negative thing. I dare you to do this, like we're going to try to tempt somebody to get into trouble. But if you look at the oldest root for the word dare, it means to presume. It means to boldly presume. It's like living daringly. So that to dare is to boldly presume an act of being, a way of being. And this morning I want to suggest to you that resurrection is a dare. Resurrection is a dare to presume something boldly. Now, the temptation for a lot of folks, always at this time, and I'm just going, a lot of you know this, a lot of you know people like this, some of you may still be there, some of you have come from places that there's a lot of ways to look at resurrection, and the most typical ones are that we simply see it as a historical event, and it just makes no sense. It happened, but it seems completely preposterous, or we just blindly accept it. Or perhaps you're on that other side, who see it as a fanciful, mythical fairy tale of sorts, or as my friend at the Growler station would say to me, a conspiracy theorist to the core, would say, a clever story concocted by the powers that be 1900 years ago in the early church to create a powerful, oppressive relationship between the church and the people. I want to suggest a third way, that resurrection, in fact, is a deeply human story of a profoundly mysterious and sacred reality. Resurrection is a deeply human story of a profoundly sacred and holy reality. That we are not, as most of our advertising and Western cultural stories and branding would tell us, that we are not the center of our universes, but in fact, we are part of something much greater than ourselves, that we are interconnected with something and somehow all of life, that our stories and our actions somehow affect one another in strange, interdependent, mysterious ways. And as such, resurrection then is in fact a scandalous dare. It's a curious, mysterious dare to live as if something transformative is happened or is happening. As the words in Isaiah suggest, behold, I am doing a new thing. The real challenge for most of us in the West is that resurrection, like so much of the Christian faith, gets hijacked. It gets hijacked, like a lot of our sacred texts, they get hijacked by the fundamentalists or the alternative right, and then resurrection becomes seen as some sort of miraculous resuscitation. And when we read John 3:16, it often gets interpreted as Jesus was this necessary sacrifice for the purpose of getting us into heaven. As if all now that we have to do, now that we've got our flight ticket, is that we're just waiting it out, biding our time in the Admiral's Lounge and waiting for the flight home. Diana Butler Bass, who is a religious social scientist, says that that's the vertical church. That's been the church for hundreds and hundreds of years. This understanding of three-tiered universe where what you see above is as far as it goes. What we can't see below is the place of Sheol. Where we are now is where we are now, and that God is somehow up above and comes down in, and death and evil is somehow down below. And so you have this vertical relationship. And she suggests that God is completely out of reach in that kind of relationship, except for this idea that Jesus' death and resurrection has to somehow become our ticket to take and then wait. But if you look at the Greek roots for the word world, it's cosmos, which doesn't mean world, it means universe, everything that is. For God so loved everything that is. For God so loved all of reality, incarnate in creation, mirrored and evidenced in the life of Jesus, that whoever believes, and remember, believe in this word is not what we think of as static, concrete concept. Believe is dynamic word as saying abides in, or if you want to use some words that I'm going to toss around today, to act as if, or to dare to act as if. That whoever dares to act as if there is new life here and now will experience deep time beyond time. What Danish theologian Niels Gregersen calls God in and beneath and around us. What the old Navajo Beauty Way song says when it says, now I walk in beauty. Beauty walks before me. Beauty walks above me. Beauty walks behind me. Beauty walks below me. Now I walk in beauty. What would it be to live in that kind of way? To live as if we do indeed live in this ground of being of God. I don't know if any of you ever saw this movie, Accidental Courtesy. It starred this guy. It's actually sort of a documentary about Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis is a black musician, a pianist, and he played in this club in Maryland, in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's this fascinating story of how he was playing one day, and a guy came up to him that night afterwards, and it was a white guy. And a friend told him later on who it was, and this guy said, man, you play a lot like Jerry Lee Lewis. He said, you must have gotten your chops from Jerry Lee Lewis. And then Daryl looks at him and says, well, I love Jerry Lee Lewis, but Jerry Lee Lewis got his chops from African American blues. And the guy looked at him and got angry. He said, that ain't right. No. And then he stormed off. And later on, his buddy said, you don't know who that guy is. That's the local Ku Klux Klan leader. You just pissed off the local Ku Klux Klan leader. And Daryl said, no, I was just telling him the truth. He can go look it up. It's a fact. That's where Jerry Lee Lewis got his chops, by following the blues of the African American culture. And the funny thing is the next week he was back to hear Daryl Davis again. And then for the next several weeks he'd come up and talk to him about his piano playing. And then finally Daryl said, so you're a Ku Klux Klan guy? And he says, yeah. And then he kind of tried to just skirt that and talk back about music. Well, over time, as the movie talks about it, those two became friends. They actually started to go out for coffee afterwards. They'd get together for lunch. All the while, Daryl knowing that he was talking to a guy from the Ku Klux Klan. All the while, the Ku Klux Klan guy obviously knowing that he was talking to a black guy. Back and forth this went, and then time went on, and this guy moved, and Daryl went on to do some other things, and he got interested in wanting to write about the Ku Klux Klan and why they think the way they do. He wanted to get sort of honest testimonial, and he wanted to write a book. The book, in fact, became, and now I didn't write it down, so now I forgot. It's not the same title, Accidental Courtesy, but he wrote this book, and then the movie's based on the book. But he had to go find this guy again, and he finally found him. He traced him down with a guy that works in the phone company, and he found him, and he just showed up at his apartment. He just showed up at his apartment one day, but the guy was ecstatic. Daryl, man, it's good to see you. And they talked for a long time, and then he said, I'm going to do this book, but I need to talk to the Grand Dragon. I need to talk to the leader. Who's the leader? The guy said, his name's Roger Kelly. You don't want to talk to that guy. He said, yeah, I want to talk to him. He said, no, that guy you just being in his presence is going to really anger him. And if you say the wrong thing, he just might kill you. And Daryl was like, I need to talk to this guy to find out. The story goes on. It's a fascinating story. You got to check it out. But here's the gist of it. They began to meet, first with the Grand Dragon's guards beside him with weapons on their belts. And that went on for some time. And then Daryl began to show up at Ku Klux Klan meetings. And when people would start to talk and there'd be this commotion and distancing and tempers start to build, that's when Roger would lean over and say, hey man, this guy's a friend of mine. We don't agree on much of anything other than we like the same music. And we like some of the same things. And he listens to me like no other black person. And then Daryl said, surprisingly enough, Roger listens to me like no other Ku Klux Klan guy. And as the story goes, it just develops from there. After about a year, there's a knock on Daryl's door, and it's Roger Kelly in his normal street clothes, not in his uniform or his dress out uniform, but he's got a bag, and in the bag are his robe and his hood and his badges. And he says, I want you to have them. I don't need them anymore. And they did an interview with him on CNN. You can look that up too online. And on the interview, it's really amazing because what Daryl says and what Roger says is the same thing. I've never been around somebody who listened so honestly and patiently with me so that I could clearly say who I was and what I felt. And I listened to him the same way. And it turns out that Roger's two leaders, his two cohorts, they too became friends with Darrell. And over time, they too gave up their robes, so that in about 4 years' time, the Ku Klux Klan was completely dismantled in Maryland, just over conversation. But it took someone willing to begin to listen. And the curious words that Roger had said that I thought were so fascinating was that he said, "I felt welcomed." Isn't that amazing? I felt more welcomed. Well, imagine, he's been in a community that's mostly filled with hate. Why would you not feel welcome there? It reminded me of that story of the prodigal son. Because in the prodigal son, he comes back, right? He comes back after he's done everything wrong. He comes back and the father just welcomes him. But what he says is, he was once dead and now he's alive. Resurrection is about welcoming. I don't know if you opened up your egg. If you didn't open up your egg, you should open up your egg now. Now, Sharma and I were talking about this, and this idea just came to me because I love fortune cookies. And not because they ever come true, necessarily, but I discovered something about fortune cookies that speaks to me of this idea of resurrection. And so we came up with these different sort of statements that I hope you find helpful or meaningful or at least fun to ponder. And I don't know what you're going to do with these things, but I remember something that Richard Rohr said. Richard Rohr said that most of our spiritual lives and all the stories and teachings of all the great religious traditions are less about the sacred trying to force us to do something or to somehow break into our lives and correct things. It's less about that. Richard Rohr says it's so much more about us learning to get out of our own way so that things can happen. It's always there. It's just getting out of the way. And as I would like to say, it's living as if. So take your fortune there, and let me just recommend something. Just try it. You can sort of hold it off and put it on your table and go, I wonder if this is ever going to happen. You can wait. It says you'll find treasure. You can say, okay, I'm going to start buying a lottery ticket. You can see if it ever happens. You can get your ticket. You can wait. Or you can take it and you can participate. And you can begin to live as if. You want more love in your life? Live as if the love is already there, and love more. You want to see more gratitude for your work and your efforts? Resurrection dares you to live as if it's already present and all you have to do is show more gratitude around you. You want more friendship. You want more people to have your back. You want forgiveness. You want reconciliation. Resurrection dares you to live as if it's already there. Just forgive more. Just have other people's back more. Just share more joy. Resurrection, band, I should invite you guys to come on up here. Yeah. Resurrection is this dare that says yes and. Life is mixed up. Life is ups and downs. Life is challenges. Life is pain. Life is joy. Life is suffering. Yes, it is all these things. And it is also this amazing dare to live as if, to rise and to meet it where it already is.